Today's parable in the Gospel of St. Matthew speaks about a punishment that will be given not to the regular people, but mostly to the people who are politicians and the religious of Israel. If you're ever here on a Tuesday evening, you will notice a vast difference in the homilies. Sometimes Bishop David or I will put a disclaimer at the beginning of the homily and say, this isn't so much for you guys. This is for the people who are becoming priests, who are becoming deacons, or who are becoming religious. We're much tougher on these guys and gals, and rightly so. Bishop David and I have talked many, many times of the fact that we are going to be held to a higher standard. When we meet the Lord, He's not going to. He's going to look at us a little bit differently, and rightly so. He's going to be asking, "Did you teach correctly? Were you good pastors, or were you not?" So when Matthew speaks today about the punishment that will be given to the religious people of Israel, it's pretty much the same thing regarding the priests, the seminarians, and those looking after the diaconate, because God does hold us to a higher standard, and as I said, rightly so. The politicians and the religious sound very similar in our day. I heard a story on CNN this week about a representative. You might have heard the story. His last name is Murphy. He's resigned, so I could care less. We'll just talk about it for a minute. He just voted, and I have nothing bad to say about his vote. It probably was a very good vote. In fact, it was a good vote. He said he voted that any abortions after 20 weeks would be illegal. And I'm fine with that, to be honest. I'm pro-life. But then a story came out during the week that he has a mistress. Now, he is a Republican, and you can look it up online, and I'm not saying that Democrats are better, but this is a case where he just voted to go along with this ban on abortion after 20 weeks because he asked his mistress in a text, be very careful, never put in a text what you wouldn't want in the front of the Herald News. It can always be used against you at some point. He put in the text, this Representative Murphy, that she should get an abortion. Now, he's a Republican who just voted days before, and he is always, if you hear him on CNN or MSNBC, he's always very pro-life. This is the biggest hypocrite in the world, who, in front of the cameras, is saying one thing, and then to his mistress, I don't know how his wife took it, but to his mistress, he's saying another thing. Jesus is looking at these same politicians, the same religious people who are hypocrites. In the church today, we have many priests, we have many bishops, we have many deacons who are, in fact, hypocrites, who will say one thing and do another thing. I think today, I've heard it said time and time again, when we were younger, the church was so much better. Was it? I don't think it was, because the problem was everything that Father said, everybody went along with. Father could do this, Father could do that. He could have mistresses. I know more priests that have had mistresses and lovers than regular people. It's crazy, huh? And these are Roman Catholic priests. And there's always scandal. I bet if I asked every one of you, you could give me 2 or 3 priests, especially if you're of my age and you've lived about 60 years, who've run off with women, who've run off with men, who've run off down to Florida for the Fort Lauderdale, to P-Town. The problem with this is The Roman Church sets up laws of celibacy for these people. If they left the church and did it, I mean, that would be another thing. But they have vowed themselves to this life, but they're being hypocrites. And how could they stand up on Sunday and preach to the people when they can't live that life themselves? They'd be better off leaving the Roman Church or the Episcopal Church. I don't want to pick just on the Romans. But Jesus' story today is talking about people bearing good fruit. The whole story today is very allegorical. The owner in the parable is clearly God. He sets up the vineyard and he rents it out. While the tenants are the prophets, Jesus is giving an allegory. And the tower stands for the house of Israel that he builds in the middle of the vineyard so that he can keep an eye on it. The produce is the good works demanded by the covenant relationship between God and his people. And the son represents Jesus, finally. And you see that as the landowner sends the tenants to pick up what he owes, what they owe him, the good fruits. They kill him. They kill the prophets. Then he sends his own son, and they kill him on top of it. The other tenants have been taken to mean largely the Gentile church and the believing Jews. Jesus quotes in Psalm 118, which was used in the early church as a prophecy of his resurrection. God is the owner of this vineyard, who he leases to the religious and political leaders of Israel, but they're not doing their job because they reject the prophets and they reject and kill his son. Matthew's community found in the parable came after the destruction by the Romans in 70 AD. So they really see the destruction of the temple and how it affected the people. So the fruits, let's look at the fruits. Do our lives bear fruit? Well, I can tell you the priests, the deacons, the religious, in some churches, and even in our own church, we may as well put ourselves there, that don't bear fruit are far from what God wants. And as priests and deacons and religious, we better start bearing fruit, and if we're not, there's something wrong. Today, we can ask ourselves the same question. Are you bearing fruit in your life? Well, usually on Mondays I'm not bearing much fruit because we're exhausted from the weekend. This past weekend was a very busy weekend for us. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with ordinations and that. And so Monday we're not bearing a whole lot of fruit. And you don't have to bear fruit every single day. There are days when you're tired. There are days when you really would rather go back to bed. So let's face it. But in general, are you bearing fruit? Are you doing things for people that are kind and that are compassionate? Or is your whole week like Monday? We'll give you Monday for free. That's a day that you can do whatever you want after a long weekend. But are you doing it consistently? Are you helping? Are you generous to those in need? And you don't have to go very far to find those in need. Today, we see in our society a lot of our brothers and sisters suffering in Texas still, in Florida, and even so in Cuba, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, I think 7% of the population have electricity. Can you imagine not having electricity, not having clean water, and having to depend on everybody and his brother for your livelihood now for some time to come? Not only these places, but the rest of the Caribbean's pretty much knocked out. And the good news is that this community has done a lot. Michael sent off a check to the Red Cross, and also we help locally. And our church in general is doing good works for these people. But you'll notice the moment that another thing comes along. We had a shooting in Las Vegas. The moment that another thing comes along, we forget about Puerto Rico. We forget about Texas. We forget about, because there's so much information. We're in an age where in 1 second we get more news than they would get years ago in a week. We're just loaded down with news. So we forget the people that are hurting, but we cannot forget the people that are hurting. We can't forget the people who are part of this opioid epidemic. We can't forget the people who are homeless. And how about the threat of nuclear war? This is just each and every day. You really have to start putting your life into the hands of God. We don't know. The minute I get up in the morning, I'm going to tell you, I don't pray anymore right away. It takes me about 15 or 20 minutes. I'm right on CNN. I have to know if we're at war, if one of our leaders declared war, or are we okay? That's pretty sad, because I'll tell you, I'm 60, I'll be 60 years old next year, and I never was tuned into the news as much as I am now. We live in a difficult time. To bear fruit in this time is going to be probably a little bit more challenging, but we must bear fruit, even under the threats of nuclear war. And nuclear war, my brothers and sisters, is not a game that we play. You know, on these, we watch the kids play anything from Angry Birds to games that are really, really tough. Some of them I saw, you know, they're blowing people's heads off. And these kids are, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is not a video game where you can hit a reset button and everything's going to be all right. This is a potential of a war that will cause annihilation to a good part of the population if it is done against North Korea. Hopefully it is not. Or South Korea. We never know what's going to happen. We are at times when we have to ask ourselves, am I right with God? Am I bearing fruit? Don't wait till next week to ask yourselves, am I ready to meet the Lord if He's taken me this week? It sounds kind of like dismal, but it's not. Am I ready now? Not next week. Next week may be too late. But am I ready now? And I think we need to ask ourselves that question. We need to start changing ourselves and challenging ourselves to bear fruit. I can tell you that this parish in general, hopefully if we're judged as a group, we're doing all right because we are helping those in need. And love, Jesus says, covers a multitude of sins. The more we love, the more we do things for people, the Lord forgives us our sins. It covers a lot of sin, and we know that. The good things that you do for people are covering a lot of your sins. Confessing them also, but making reparations for the things that we've done against people is very, very, very important. We live in a time like no other. So let us concentrate, my brothers and sisters, on becoming better human beings, more compassionate human beings. If you want to say better Christians, fine. You cannot give to the world what you do not have. If you are not right inside here, then it might be time to change. We were talking this week about the levels of prayer at Bible study. And the first level of prayer is always, I'm going to keep repeating it until you know it, I want, I need, could I have? And that's fine. Prayers of petition are fine. But we have to get beyond that prayer of petition all the time. God is not a genie. Every time we're going to rub a magical lamp, we come here on Sunday and say, oh, dear Lord, I need, I want, could I have? May I please? That's fine. God knows that we need things. But are we going any deeper into our relationship with God? This week on Thursday we'll talk about it, and next week's homily will reflect it as well. How do we get deeper into loving God? What are the other types of prayer that we can use in our lives that aren't I need, I want, please give me? And those are fine. Those are good prayers to have at the beginning. But we have to get a little bit deeper into our prayer life. Why do we have to do it? Not because if we say a million Hail Marys, we're going to go to heaven. That's not going to work. But if we start having a relationship with God and He with us, things will change in our life. The threat of nuclear war won't be all that much because we know that we're going to be with God either way. Who wins a political office, whether they're Republican or Democrat, if you're a Christian, means a lot less. Because He is our King. We must put Him first, not so much the president. Who cares? He's in for 4 years if they're lucky. This is our King that we view. So today, let us ask God to deepen our relationship with Him, which is the most important thing that you will ever do, is to deepen it. To know Him. Do you know Him? Or do you just give Him a laundry list each and every Sunday? Is He your Lord? Do you know Him as a lover? He's the lover of our souls. And no matter how good our mothers and fathers have been to us, God is always much, much more powerful in love. So today, let us ask the Lord, how can I become deeper in love with you? What could I do? And talk to Him. In spiritual direction, I had one directee who said, I don't want to say the word he said, but I get irritated with God. And I get mad at Him. And that's fine. This deepens your relationship with God. In a family, and I can tell you even in marriage, you get irritated with each other at times to the point where it gets heated. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. Maybe you're all saints and you're not at that level. But you can get aggravated with each other. But this aggravation, this fighting, if handled right, and if you listen to the other person, it's just like with God. If you need to get mad at God, get mad at Him. Take the gloves off. If you need to tell Him off, tell Him off. His shoulders are big. He can handle it. And sometimes we think that being religious is being pious. Coming into church with your hands folded. But inside you're broken. That piety is like saccharine. It's not worth anything. Fight with God if you need to fight with Him. We've seen the great saints wrestle with God over. He always wins in the end, but as we know. But to get a relationship with Him, put it all on the table. All the crap that you have inside that you want to get rid of, give it to Him. All the things that you think make you a smaller person, tell Him about it. He wants to know. He loves us. And if we put all our cards on the table, this is the next phase of the love relationship we have with Him. Just don't see Him as a postcard or even as a crucifix or a nice picture. That's all nice. That's all well. No, that's all good. But have a relationship with Him where every day you can talk with Him about the hard things that are going on in your life, about the good things. Thank Him when something, good happens to you.